Hello and welcome to Top 10 Thursdays on Big Train TV. I'm your host, Alex Strain, and today we're looking at game number 4 on our countdown of the top 10 greatest games in Bethesda Big Train history. This matchup is from July 13th, 2017, and saw the Bethesda Big Train take on the Alexandria Aces at Shirley Povich Field in what eventually became one of the longest and most memorable games in franchise history. For this episode, we'll be speaking to Big Train front office member Chris Rogers, Big Train manager Sal Colangelo, as well as former Big Train broadcaster Max Wolpoff and former Big Train players Stephen Schoch, James Outman, and Vinny Esposito. We've got a lot on the store, and let's get started.
The summer of 2017 saw a competitive battle for the Cal Ripken League South Division lead. Throughout the summer, it was a back-and-forth battle between the Bethesda Big Train and the Alexandria Aces, one that dragged into the second week of July. Entering July 13th, 2017, the Aces held a one-game lead over the Big Train as the teams rounded into the final 5 games of the regular season. With the two best teams ready to square off that night in mid-July at Shirley Povich Field in Bethesda, Maryland, the stakes couldn't have been higher.
I still remember the implications of this game. Alexandria came in a game ahead of the Big Train in the division, and if Big Train lost this game, then that would have set up the next week's game in Alexandria as a potential South Division heavyweight matchup of teams that were so close in record, and they would have been tied in head-to-head. Big Train had to win this game.
The Aces entered the game as a team who were surprisingly competitive in a league normally dominated by Baltimore and Bethesda. The team featured a strong lineup and an all-around competitive roster that had shown itself to be a legitimate competitor to the Big Train.
They had two guys who were – they had a bunch of guys who were really good at the plate, but two stand out specifically, Ethan Kittay and Mac Nathanson. And Nathanson was especially big in this game, I remember. But they were just forces at the plate all season long. They were hitting like 4 or 5 in the Aces lineup, I want to say. And Nathanson – I think ended up tied with James Outman for the RBI lead, or was close to it at the end of the year. He was definitely an MVP candidate. But those two guys, and then they had guys Zuberer at the top of the lineup, another guy Slaughter. They were all good hitters. You know, their whole lineup, but especially like 1 through 6 was, you know, a really solid lineup that could get things done.
They were solid. They had a good leadoff guy, Max Schumann. I remember he was offered to us from Western Michigan, and they had the Slaughter kid that was a catcher that was pretty good. He always swung well. They hit the ball really well. On the bump, they struggled at times, but overall they were very competitive, and coach did a good job with them.
I remember that year they were kind of like our rivals, just in terms of we were competing with them every single game, whether we were playing them or not, just because we were trying to get that top seed spot.
On the flip side, though the Big Train entered the contest down by a game in the standings, they had a swagger in the way they played and chemistry throughout the clubhouse.
I don't know. It says something about the Big Train and their style, really. I mean, you go in there and you don't know what to expect as a summer ball player, but when you're coming in with those guys and those personalities, it's just a lot of fun, really. And that's what it comes down to. In order to be successful in the summer, you have to mesh well. And it's a lot of chemistry. And for the 2 years that I was there, it was nothing but chemistry, man, and just a lot of fun.
I think that we played with a lot of, like, swagger, you know, and that allowed us to have a lot of fun when we were playing, which in turn made us the best team, giving us, like, the best record winning the championship, because we were just playing to have fun. We were playing like we expected to win. You know, we weren't stressed out about what was going to happen, you know, game to game or anything. We were just playing to have fun.
The game got off to a fast start, and the Big Train jumped all over Aces starter Matthew Brooks in the bottom of the first, tagging him for 3 runs on RBI hits by Kevin Milam and Luke Heyer.
Milam and Heyer, two guys who were central in the lineup. Milam was there pretty much the whole season. Came maybe a game or two late, but you know, he was a St. Mary's guy. They always send really good guys to Bethesda, and Kevin Milam was one of them. I mean, he was two-way guy. He started in our bullpen and then ended up as a starting pitcher in the rotation at the end of the year, and then played a really solid first base for us all season long, DH'd some, and hit over 300, had some doubles and home run power. So he was always right in the mix of things offensively. And Luke Heyer came late. He was a Kentucky guy, and I think they made a pretty deep run, at least to regionals, maybe super regionals that year. So he showed up late, but he had a little bit of a slow start, but then he just caught on fire and was arguably the team's best hitter down the stretch. I mean, there was a period of time where it seemed like he was just, he hit some home runs. He had some definite power, but he was just smoking line drives to center and to left. And
he's a good player. He's got a lot of pop. And I remember when he first showed up, it started off like a little slow, and then all of a sudden, like the best player in the league, like hitting bomb after bomb. I remember he was hitting like bombs, like oppo center bombs, and it was pretty impressive to watch. He was our home run derby contestant for the Big Train.
Luke started slow. It was an adjustment with the wood bat. Luke is an amazing person. What a great kid. I remember when he was drafted, he called and said, "Thanks for everything." Just a class act. But he started slow. And that just goes to show you, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and it's about the end result. And Luke, by the end of, within 3 or 4 games into the season, holy mackerel. And he even says that a lot of the summer kind of changed who he was as a player and as a hitter going back to Kentucky. So that's what summer ball's about.
The Aces would chip away at the Big Train edge, though, getting one back in the second and then tying the game at 3 apiece in the third, thanks to an error that later in the game would loom large. The score wasn't knotted for long, though, as Vinny Esposito delivered an RBI hit in the bottom of the fourth to put Bethesda back on top 4-3. Esposito delivering in a big spot was par for the course for a player who had torn up the Ripken League a year earlier and was in his second season of terrorizing CR-CBL pitchers.
Vinny Esposito was, the second coming of Barry Bonds in 2016. He went on this insane run at the end of the year where every at-bat was, either a walk or an extra base hit somewhere. And so I think there were really, really high expectations for him coming into 2017, perhaps too high. And he still ended up being a really good player. He was traditionally a first baseman and outfielder, and he got moved to second base just because we needed his bat in the lineup. And we had a lot of corner guys, but he played a solid second base, and he was hitting low in the lineup, like 8th or 9th compared to 4th or 5th the last year, but was still a really good hitter. And I think him hitting that low is more a testament to just how deep and productive the lineup was, more than it was about him. I mean, he was still getting stuff done. He had like 5 or 6 homers on the year and was just really central part of that lineup.
So when Esposito came up with Heyer on base in that inning, when he hit the first pitch, none of us were surprised. It was Vinny doing Vinny again. But that was another case of Big Train had worked over the starting pitcher, Matt Brooks, in the game and were forced him to work some long at-bats. Heyer was another one who had worked lengthy at-bats earlier. And when Esposito came up and just said, "First pitch, let's go," it was writing on the wall for Matthew Brooks for the Aces that he was about to go out of the game.
The Big Train held the lead until it was time to go to the bullpen, as starter Blake Sanderson clocked out, having gone 5 innings with 3 runs allowed. An admirable effort from a back-end starter.
I mean, I still remember Blake Sanderson as a back-of-the-rotation starter for Big Train in this season, but in this game, he was called upon to give probably the best start of the entire season. And sure, he allowed 5 hits, but I mean, he was one of the better performers of that game to keep the game close, and especially with the Big Train offense being as potent as it was, getting 3 runs in the first inning. Sanderson had a great cushion to work with before he had to be pulled out of the game. And I think his 5 innings gave Big Train a chance to take it to Alexandria.
With Sanderson out of the game, the Big Train went to a pair of role players out of the bullpen in Matt Poulos and Jack Alkier, big opportunities for lesser-known pitchers, and partially by circumstance.
One of the things I remember about this stretch is this was July 13th. I think on the 12th or the 11th, we had played a doubleheader. And then the night after, we ended up going to extra innings again. So it was just a string of games where we were going through a lot of pitchers. So guys who, maybe wouldn't get an opportunity at other points of the season were being asked to step up into bigger roles.
In the 7th inning, the big train ran into trouble. Poulos surrendered a single and a hit by pitch, and that's when Alkier entered, promptly getting a flyout to right that moved the runner from second up to third, leaving runners on the corners with one out. Sal Colangelo then went to his closer and best reliever, Stephen Schoch.
Schoch was a shutdown guy all season long. So anytime he came in the game, you were like, okay, the other team's not going to score. So when he came in, I figured he's probably going to go the distance through the 9th, and hopefully we can score before then because, I know the Aces won.
That whole summer was just about enjoying the game of baseball, Like I had just gotten done sitting out for a year thinking about, that was the year UMBC won our conference, and I had to just sit there and watch the whole time. I couldn't contribute to it at all or anything like that other than just trying to be a good teammate. And getting back out there, my first summer was playing – or that summer was my first time playing in pretty much a year in, like, an actual competitive game. And, like, I think the whole reason I was successful was because I had a bunch of gratitude just to be there and just to be playing every day because, sitting out really sucked.
Schoch got a fielder's choice and a flyout to end the inning, but the former allowed the runner on third to score, and the game was tied at 4. The big train would leave Schoch in for the 8th and 9th as they attempted to claw for a victory in regulation.
The 7th inning rolls around and Alkier comes out and gets one big out. It wasn't much of a surprise to say, all right, you got your one, but it was also a lengthy at bat. Let's go to Stephen Schoch now and see if he can get 8 outs for us. And unfortunately, Schoch, one of the troubles that he came into coming in with runners already on, he had a 0 ERA, but the times that he allowed runs was when other pitchers had left people on base for him. So the first couple of batters, when they got hits and got on base, that was runs charged to Poulos. But Schoch eventually shut the door 8 and 9. And it was pretty much a foregone conclusion once the Aces batted down in the 9th. We're going to extras, aren't we?
Indeed, we were going to extras. The big train threatened but did not score in the 9th, and the game plowed forward, as Colangelo then turned to Nash Eppard out of his bullpen, whose performance would become legendary.
Nash Eppard, he pitched a little length early in the season, like, maybe a 2 or 3 inning outing here and there, but down the stretch, he was mostly a 1-inning guy, and he was really, really effective out of the bullpen. He was from Bryant, and they run a really good pitching program, or they at least did at that time. I don't know about now. But, yeah, he was really good. He would just come out of the bullpen. He struck out a lot of guys, and he would get outs. And so it wasn't surprising to see Sal go to him after Schoch because he's the kind of guy who can shut down other teams out of the bullpen.
Sure, Nick, I just remember him coming in, was a redshirt freshman. He was a big kid, 6'4", 6'6", tight frame, straight over the top. Was just trying to find his groove that summer. Struggled early with his command, but as the summer went on, got a lot better. And when his breaking ball was consistent, it was really, really good. And that night for 6 innings, we had intended to only throw him like 1 or 2 innings right after Shockey. And he was rolling so much that we just left him in there and figured we'd burn him for the next 4 or 5 days to try to get the win.
Bethesda threatened in several of the extra frames, while Eppard kept the Aces' offense at bay, but it culminated in the 13th inning, starting with a Justin Morris leadoff double, and I'll let Chris and Max describe the rest.
It was J-Mo who doubled, and then Vinny walked, and so it's 2 on with no outs. And I think Giancarski was up next, and I forget what he did, but then Fox Simones comes up, and he rips a line drive to first base. And, of course, it's just the worst possible place to hit it because, Vinny's only a couple feet off the bag, but it's a line drive right at the first baseman who's on the bag, and it's an easy double play. And I feel like that was just kind of the story of the early extra innings is Big Train was putting good swings on the ball, and they're putting together good at-bats and getting guys in scoring position. But sometimes by no fault of their own, they're just not able to come through.
And here comes Fox Simones. Fox had already not a great night in the field, and this is his chance to win the game. On the second pitch, Esposito goes, I'm going to try to steal. So he runs from first to second on the pitch. Simone's hits it about as hard as you can, and Ethan Kittay, the first baseman, dives to his right, gets the ball, turns around and steps on first, and it's a double play. So sitting in the booth watching this happen, I could not believe my eyes when Kittay caught the ball and then stepped on first, because it just meant, oh no, we're going to a 14th inning. Are you serious?
Yes, it was serious. With the big train coming up empty, the game slogged forward and eventually reached the 15th inning, by which point the contest was becoming both a marathon and an all-timer, stretching into the late hours of the night where the conditions and length began to take a toll.
We were going to do everything we could to win the game, even though it was like dragging on. It was basically first one to give in was going to lose the game.
In the top of the 15th inning, with Eppard still in the game, Mac Nathanson stepped to the plate and cranked a no-doubt home run to give the Aces a 5-4 lead.
One of the loudest, furthest home runs I've ever seen at Povich Field. I mean, he destroyed that ball. It went up into the trees, like up in left field. There's the deciduous trees in the background, the pine trees in the foreground, and it went through the very tops of the pine trees. That was, and Eppard was in his 6th inning of work. He wasn't a long relief or a starter. So, it was impressive that he had gone that long. And then you see Nathanson tee off. And after the struggles that we had, that's how baseball works. It seems like one team gets a ton of chances to score and they don't convert. And then the other team just capitalizes on one bad pitch, and that's the game. So when Nathanson hit that, we're like, well, Eppard had a really good run. Like, it's not his fault that we're down in this game. And, the offense had chances and it just didn't work out. Like, it is what it is.
I still remember the sound of the bat that it made when Mac Nathanson hit that ball. So Nathanson had already had a great game that night, and 2 of the 3 hits that Eppard gave up in extra innings were to Nathanson. It was a single and then this home run. But that home run it sucked all the air out of Povich Field that night.
The inning ended shortly thereafter, but the Aces were now in the driver's seat, and in the bottom half, the first 2 big train hitters were retired, putting the team down to their final out, and the season at a breaking point.
That late in the game, there's a lot of fatigue sets in for staff. So, the person running the scoreboard is getting tired, and the operations interns are getting tired. And at that point, like, even the fans who are there are just kind of bonding with the staff. It's like, okay, we're all in this together. We're all sticking it out through the end of the game. So let's hope it ends soon, but with a positive result. When Nathanson hit that home run, I think everyone was kind of a little bummed because we'd sat there through 14 innings of baseball, and we felt like we were the better team. Big Train was getting guys on. We were more dominant on the mound, and then it's like we sit through 14 innings only for the Aces to take the lead. Like, nah, that isn't how this one should end.
It was the high character that all the guys had, the will to fight and not to quit, because it would have been very easy just to quit and lay down.
Thanks to that character, the team just kept fighting. With 2 outs and 2 strikes, the Big Train got a lucky break as a wild pitch on a swinging third strike to Vinny Esposito evaded the catcher and allowed Esposito to reach first, extending the inning. Zach Jankarski then singled, and suddenly, things got out of control for Aces reliever Jacob Parker, who threw 8 straight balls to walk both Fox Simones and Logan Driscoll, forcing in the game-tying run.
And the Aces, it was a bit more piecemeal. And so this guy, I think some of it was fatigue and probably some of it was mental. He felt like he got that third out on Esposito, and then, for the next guy, Jankarski, to get a base hit. And suddenly you have 2 on, and he just loses command to Fox. And Fox was a guy really patient, really disciplined, and he was a high on base guy, so he's not going to swing at pitches out of the zone. And so he took a couple close pitches, and then I think by the time that Driscoll came up with the bases loaded, the guy seemed just fatigued. Like he couldn't find the zone. Driscoll is one of the best hitters in the league, and you could tell he was kind of treading carefully around him, not trying to throw him anything down the middle. But by the time Driscoll came up, the pitches didn't even seem close.
And the wheels just fell off for Jacob Parker. 4 straight pitches for Simones, 4 straight pitches for Driscoll, walk, bring in the tying run, and here comes James Outman.
James Outman strode to the plate, the best hitter in the league, and with the winning run just 90 feet away, in a 5-5 tie and in the bottom of the 15th inning with 2 outs. It was simply a Hollywood lead-up, and for Bethesda, it would be a Hollywood ending.
It was first pitch, and it's a pitch kind of in on the hands. Outman swings, and it's little broken bat blooper kind of dying toward left center field over the shortstop's head. And the shortstop and left fielder and center fielder converge, and one of them dives for it. And at first it looks like it's been caught and that it's this crazy catch to end the game. And then you see that the ball's trapped, it's on the ground, and whoever was on third base, I think it was Jankarski, crosses home, and the crowd is just going crazy. Like, the ball was up in the air for a while, and while it's up in the air, it's like everything is going in slow motion. Outman's in slow motion running to first, and Jankarski's in slow motion coming home, and the fans are just kind of slowly turning their heads toward left field to see what happens with the ball. And then when it falls, the crowd just erupted.
With that, the big train had knocked off the Aces and pulled into a tie for first place. This game represented the turning point of the season, as the big train would finish the season undefeated down the stretch to win the division and eventually take home the championship.
This game, I think it's no shortage of breath to say, this game allowed Big Train to win the Ripken League championship that season. This game left them to be the first place team in the playoffs, and they avoided the 1-game playoff, which the Aces lost to Silver Spring. So it's no shortage to say that this one win against Alexandria this late in the season, head-to-head against the division rival, in the 15th inning, coming from behind to win, was a major turning point in the chapters of the 2017 season.
Big Train enters the game down 1 game in the standings behind the Aces for the Cal Ripken League South Division. And up until that point, for the better part of a decade, it had been Big Train versus Redbirds every year in the championship. And most years, especially in the few seasons leading up to that, it had been both teams ran away with the division. And the 2017 Aces were a really, really good team. They had been in first for a lot of the season, and it just seemed like Big Train was a really good team, but it seemed like they were really going to have to fight to win that division. And so they're able to win that game, which brings them into a virtual tie with the Aces. And I can't remember who had the tiebreaker after that game, but then Big Train went on to win out the rest of the season. There were like 5 games left maybe, and they won all of them, I think, and cruised into the playoffs. The Aces, who seemed like they would be a formidable opponent in the playoffs, ended up losing in the play-in games. And Big Train cruised to the championship series against the Redbirds and then ended up winning.
That's it for this week's edition of Top 10 Thursdays on Big Train TV. A big thanks to Chris, Max, Sal, Vinny, James, and Steven for joining us, and I hope all of you enjoyed watching. On next week's episode, we'll be moving into the upper echelon of our Top 10 countdown, looking at game number 3 on the list, and we'll be going all the way back to the beginning, to 1999. I hope you'll join us for that episode next week, and until then, be sure to subscribe to Big Train TV on YouTube for more great content, and we'll see you next week.
1 in 10,000 children are born with a brain malformation known as Dandy-Walker syndrome. Dandy-Walker can cause enlargement of the skull, lack of muscle control, and other developmental challenges. More research is needed, but we do know that early therapy helps many live healthier, fuller lives. 1 in 10,000 may not seem like a lot, unless your child is the one. Learn more, find help, and help others. Visit dandy-walker.org.